to turn off your video.
Okay.
So anybody that turns on your video, you will be in the recording. But I am Paige Singleton. I'm your customer success consultant with Turnitin. And my role at Turnitin is to help people successfully use our software. So that is what we're here today, is to help you use Turnitin within Blackboard. And you're using a specific type of plugin that we call the Blackboard Basic plugin. So that's why that's on the training outline. So I have our training goals that we're going to be working on, creating and managing a Turnitin assignment. And then we will delve into, after we create the Turnitin assignment, then I'll teach you how to use Feedback Studio to do a number of things, but our key things are going to be to interpret the similarity reports, to mark up a student paper, and to score a student paper using Turnitin. So down here where I have our objectives, I also have these documents here that I have just written, and basically they're my training notes. So the things that I say, a good portion of them are in these training notes. So you might want to open those up out of the chat window. That way when you go back later on and you are trying to remember what was it that Paige said, then you can review those notes. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to log into, I've logged into Blackboard. Let me pull it over for you and show you. So hopefully everybody can see what I'm doing. And just as a reminder, we are recording the training, so don't forget that. And oh, that's what I was going to tell you. Please feel free to interrupt me at any point in time. I don't mind. I don't mind going back over something that I've just said. So interrupt me, even if I've moved on to something else. Say, hey, Paige, can you go back? It's no problem whatsoever. So what I was going to show you was, I am in your University of Houston site. And I went ahead and created a Turnitin assignment earlier today. So this is really what the Turnitin assignment is going to look like after you create it. I wanted to show that to you first so that you can kind of get a picture in your mind of what you're going for. When you set up a Turnitin assignment, a good part of the setup process is going to be setting up the settings. And the reason why that's important is that once you've set up the Turnitin assignment, you're going to get back a similarity report score. So I've got a paper that I uploaded this morning that's reporting that 5% of the paper matches other sources found somewhere on the internet or in a publication or on another student paper. And this is what the similarity report actually looks like in a product that we call Feedback Studio. So wherever you see Feedback Studio, this is the name of the product that Turnitin has, where an instructor can go in and analyze originality reports. So I can come in, these red buttons will help you analyze originality reports. And they also can help you to do some other things like filtering. You can filter out quotes and bibliographies and do a number of things here. Also within the software, though, you have a grading component to the software where you can add quick marks to a student paper. So you can mark up a student paper by adding marks to the paper. You can add either quick marks or you can add your own comments. So quick marks are going to be saved comments that you can drag to a paper. You can add your own comments. You can add text to the paper. You can write on the paper. So these are some things I'm going to show you how to do. You can also score the paper using a rubric. So if I click on the rubric, then you can score it. So part of this training, I'm going to show you how you create these rubrics that you can then use to score papers. So notice as I add points to the rubric, it's calculating. And when I apply it to the grade, I can start to score this paper electronically. By the way, that grade that you give to students in Turnitin is going to migrate directly to the Blackboard gradebook. So if you choose to grade papers using Turnitin, there's an easy migration path. The grades just go right in. The third component, though, of Feedback Studio is ETS E-Rater. I'm going to show you how to enable that for an assignment. I'm going to turn it on here and let it load so that you can see what it looks like before I show you how to enable it. And in Feedback Studio, it's an automated spelling and grammar check. So notice here that when I enabled it, these purple comments came onto the paper, and students are going to be able to see these comments, and you can set your assignment up so that your students can see these comments, then they can revise their paper and they can resubmit it. I'll actually show you two options you have for how you want to have that workflow happen, because it's a pretty neat thing that the students really like to be able to get these comments. By the way, here's an example of what a comment looks like. The ETS has identified that the student is using a passive voice, and so they're giving them this comment. As an instructor, you can add comments of your own, or you can dismiss these. but I'll show you how to enable ETS. One thing to note about ETS is it does come in 5 categories. ETS E-Rater is checking the paper for grammar, mechanics, style, usage, and spelling. Notice that I have not turned on usage and mechanics, so I'll show you how to do that inside of setting up the assignment. If you choose to use Turnitin to mark up and score student papers, and you're using it for ETS and you're using it for rubrics, down at the bottom you have a download button. Here you can download all of that in a report. So I'll show you the reporting mechanisms that are also found within the software. And also down here at the bottom you have an information button, which basically will give you data about Turnitin, or specifically data about the student paper. So this is your submission data. So we're going to get to all of this and I'll explain it in more detail. Right now, let me go back, and what I want to show you how to do is how to create the assignment that is going to enable you to do all of these things. So if we have any questions so far, please feel free to ask those. If not, I'm going to start the process of creating the assignment from the very beginning. So what I would do to create an assignment that allows me to do these things is I would go to a content area in my course in Blackboard. Now I'm in a sandbox course, so I have kind of just some test type of content. What I'm going to do is go to the Assessments tab, and under the Assessments tab you'll have this option for a Turnitin assignment. So I'm going to select Turnitin assignment, and it will load this page. Now, the first time, if you've never used Turnitin, the first time you load this page, you will not have these 3 options. You will only have the option for a paper assignment, so it's going to take you straight to a paper assignment. After you have created your first paper assignment, the next time you create an assignment, you'll have 3 options. You can create a paper assignment, a peer mark assignment, or a revision assignment. Peer mark is a really nice feature. Peer mark is this ability to, once students have submitted papers for a paper assignment, to assign those papers out to their peers and let students peer review each other's papers. I point this out to you now. I'm not going to go into detail about peer mark. I'm just letting you know it's there. Another type of assignment, though, that is here it can be very important for an instructor is called a revision assignment. So let's say that you have a paper and you would like to get the first draft from your students. You would like to retain a copy of the first draft and then have students upload a second draft or a third draft or a final draft. What you can do is set up your first draft as a paper assignment, and then you can, the next time you set up an assignment, set up a revision assignment. And in this way, you'll be able to keep a history of all of the student attempts at revising their paper. So in today's training, because we're just getting started, I'm going to focus in on the paper assignment. But we're going to do some advanced trainings for you guys in which we can delve more deeply into peer mark and revision assignments and how those work. So I'm going to select paper assignment and choose next step. And this is going to load the assignment page, creating a new assignment. So let's see if I'm getting that to load. Oh, it's waiting for Turnitin. So let's see what it does. Give it a second. So sometimes you do have to wait a little bit for it to load the assignment settings page. And this is what it loaded. One thing I wanted to point out to you is that up at the top, if there's ever going to be a service outage from Turnitin, which we do have a scheduled system maintenance on July 10th, there will be a note up here at the top. So you're going to want to pay attention to those messages. If after you've seen the message you don't want to see it again, you can just close it out. But there is a service outage on July 10th, so mark that on your calendar that on that date, I would not have any assignments due for Turnitin on that date because students will not be able to upload assignments on that date. They're doing some data center maintenance is what they're doing, so it's planned. So I'm going to give my, my assignment a title. I'm going to build an argument essay title and give it a 100-point value. If you are going to grade with Turnitin, you definitely need the point value. And then I'm going to choose what file types that I would like to allow for students to upload to Turnitin. You've got 2 choices. You can allow file types that Turnitin can check for originality and those that Turnitin cannot. So the file types that Turnitin can check for originality are going to be PDFs and Word docs. You can upload Google Docs, rich text files, PDF and Word docs seem to be the most popular. The files that you can't upload are going to be your Mac files. So if you have a student that's using Mac and they're producing files with Macs, they're going to want to convert their files to a PDF first and upload the PDF. So keep that in mind if you're using Turnitin. If you switch over and you say allow any file type, here's what's going to happen. This means that students are going to be allowed to upload anything, even if Turnitin can't check it for similarity. However, we have a number of instructors that use Turnitin to grade papers, but they don't really want the similarity report because they like our grading tools. So if you're a math teacher or a science teacher, you can have students take pictures of their assignments and upload them, and then you can use Turnitin to grade them. You just won't get back a similarity report. Keep in mind that students cannot upload image files. If you want a check for similarity, we can only have files that contain highlightable, readable text. So be very careful as you're doing file types with Turnitin. If you ever, by the way, get a 0% score back from a paper, sometimes what's happened is it might be a PDF, but it's a PDF that was scanned. And so it's actually an image of text and not readable text, then you might not get a score back. So when you're doing this with files, keep that in mind. Okay, thoughts?
Paige, quick question.
Sure.
Yeah, so when you select any file type, can you go over briefly what kind of files that are supported but may not generate a similarity report?
Oh, mainly I would say JPEGs and PNG files. Students can upload those, but also your Mac files. Because remember, Turnitin can't check a Mac file for similarity. We only do Microsoft files, PowerPoints, Excels, Word docs, and then PDFs. So the solution to the problem is to convert the file to a PDF and upload the PDF when in doubt. What I'll do for you is I'll show you the file types on the student side. There's a list of them so that you can see a list of them.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Anybody else have a question? Next thing you're going to do is set your dates. Start date is when the assignment is going to start. Due date, when is it going to be due? And then you have this post date. If you decide that you're going to use Turnitin to deliver feedback to your students, that is, you're going to mark up and score student papers using Turnitin, this post date controls when students are able to access that feedback. You can backdate this all the way back to the start date of the assignment. So usually if I have a start date of the 20th, you can maybe put it on the 21st. And if you do that, the effect is that your feedback will trickle out to students as you grade papers. If you'd rather hold that feedback until you've had a chance to grade all papers, you can post date that feedback, maybe go up to go into July and maybe put it on the 5th. So you've got an option as to how the feedback is released to the students. We also call this a feedback release date in a lot of our documentation. Okay, questions so far? Notice I give you a note here that this date does not control visibility in the gradebook. So if you want to withhold a grade from students in the gradebook, you also need to go to the Grade Center and hide that grade from the students there. So just keep that in mind as you're using Turnitin. If you click this optional settings button here, it will open up the optional settings that you have for Turnitin. And this is where you're really going to refine what type of an assignment that you're going to give to students. So I view assignments in two broad categories, either formative assignments or summative assignments. And so as you're thinking about what type of assignments you're going to do, then think about, why am I using Turnitin? Am I using Turnitin strictly to check for plagiarism? I just want to get the score back. Or am I using Turnitin more as a teaching tool? I want my students to be able to have access to their ETS E-Rater comments, have access to their similarity scores so that they can revise their paper and maybe re-upload it. So you kind of think about how you're going to use Turnitin in terms of your individual teaching styles. So you have to first decide, are you going to allow students to submit after the due date? If you say yes here, the only students that can submit after the due date are students who have not submitted a paper before. So if a student submits the paper, once the due date hits, they can't resubmit the paper after the due date. If you say yes, you're saying if a student has not yet submitted, then they may submit after the due date, and they get one submission past the due date. So that's the functionality there. Then you have to decide, are you going to generate similarity reports? Remember, we have some teachers that use Turnitin strictly for grading, and they don't generate similarity reports for their students. In this case, I'm going to generate one. Then you have to decide, well, when do you want the similarity reports to generate? Most people would say I want them to generate immediately, and I'm going to show them to my students so that my students can see them. So if you wanted to do that, generate the reports immediately, and then also show the reports to students, I would want to change this right here to a yes. And the effect of that is that the report's generated immediately and the student can see it. If you come back to this option and you choose this first selection here, first report is final, what you're saying is, I'm generating the report immediately, I'm letting my students see it, but I'm not going to let them resubmit. Whatever they've submitted, that's the final report, no resubmissions allowed. If you then wanted the students to resubmit, or you wanted the students to revise and upload another draft, you could create a revision assignment, and that would work. And you would keep your drafts and be able to see everything the student's doing. If you choose right here immediately, can overwrite reports until due date, and then you also allow students to see the reports, then what you are in fact saying is, students, I'm going to let you upload your paper, I'm going to let you see your originality report score, then I'm going to let you revise your paper until the due date. You can revise your paper as many times as you like, and then you can re-upload. If they upload a second time, it's going to overwrite their original report. So you're not going to be keeping drafts of each paper each time the student uploads. They're going to continuously overwrite. What I usually tell people is that if you want to keep draft copies, use revision assignments or use separate Blackboard assignments. If you don't want to keep those drafts, you just want to see the final paper, set this to overwrite reports until due date, and that will accomplish that for you. You could also say, if it was a summative style assessment, you say, you know, I'm not going to let the students see the reports. I want the report to generate either immediately, first report is final, it's a one and done, that's it. So it's kind of up to you how you want to use these combinations of settings. You can also set the reports to generate on the due date, and that means that every student's report will generate on the due date whenever it passes. So it's kind of up to you. So questions about these settings here?
I mean, I have a question about maybe best practices, but it's not immediately related to what these options mean.
So you want to go ahead and ask the question, and I'll tell you whether it relates here or not.
Okay, sure. So I'm just thinking, like, in terms of practicalities, a lot of times what we see is that students don't necessarily go to the feedback studio to look at the feedback, right? They see their grade, and then they're like, okay, cool, that's the grade, and then that's it. So I guess, what are some ways which we can motivate students to turn their paper in early, look at the similarity report, and then, you know, revise and submit?
I can think of a couple of ways. You could give your students a threshold that if their score goes above this amount that they need to revise and resubmit. You can, and I've always thought that if I were teaching, this is how I would do it. You could create a discussion board that asks them to reflect upon the feedback that you gave them, to maybe select some of the feedback that you gave them and write how they would revise their paper in light of what you've said to them. So that would be, to me, another way. Another way is to create the revision assignment and force the students to look at their original assignment, to revise it, and then upload a different draft so that you can then see this was what they originally submitted, and then this is what they revised and submitted. So Taylor, that's a few things I can think of that you could do to kind of encourage, because you're right, students don't necessarily look at the feedback unless we give them a reason to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, in my experience, it's good to give them like a video tutorial of how to get there, and then what they mean. But I like your idea of the revision assignment because it's a much more structured, kind of scaffolded approach where they have definite due dates, they turn in the assignment, and then they have a second due date where they have to implement some of your feedback, or at the very least, they have to fix what's wrong in the similarity report.
And I also will add this in. I've been doing a lot of studying lately on contract cheating and students buying papers. And doing a scaffolded approach where they have to submit drafts like that can actually reduce the likelihood that a student will go out and get somebody else to write their paper. Because you're in effect saying, you're going to write the draft, I want to see the draft, then I want to see your revision. So you're forcing them really to start at the very beginning of the writing process, as opposed to just getting a paper and turning it in. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's good.
So I think it's some really good points. And my thoughts for all of you is that's why I want you to think about the settings and how you're going to use them to set up the type of assignments that you want so that you can kind of tackle some of those issues. And we can talk in a minute how to get students to look at feedback, because I think that there are, you can, once we get to Feedback Studio. And Taylor, don't let me forget, but if y'all ever want to do a best practices session, we can do a best practices session too.
Okay, great.
So I did want to talk to you right here about this field, one other thing about the field, and that is what's called the collusion check. So what Turnitin does, we're concerned about two different types of cheating in this respect. Students who have copied from people outside of their class, but we're also concerned about copying that's going on inside of a class. So we actually check student papers twice. If you select immediately, Turnitin is going to deliver a similarity report immediately, but then Turnitin is also going to, on the due date, run all of the papers back through Turnitin and check the students' papers against each other within a given class. That's called the collusion check. So every once in a while, you might notice that the score in Turnitin changes on the due date, the similarity score. If that has happened, that means that Turnitin found matches within the class when they did the second run of the paper. I don't know if that, hopefully that makes sense to you. But it's called the collusion check in Turnitin. In terms of the similarity index, you do have some control over its content. You can choose whether or not to exclude the bibliography, to exclude quoted materials, or to exclude small sources. I'm going to go ahead and mark excluding the bibliography as yes. Excluding quoted materials, I'm going to put as no, and small sources, I'm going to put as no. Just to let you know, with small sources, if you do click yes, you have to set a threshold for what constitutes a small source. In other words, is a small source less than 10 words? Is a small source less than 15 words? Or is it less than a certain percentage? I don't have as many people using the small source thresholds as I do using this bibliography, eliminating the bibliography. Keep in mind that if you set the setting here in Turnitin's assignment settings, that means that this setting will apply to every paper for the assignment. You can also do each of these same exclusions inside Feedback Studio on a paper-by-paper basis. So my recommendation here with quotes is that you don't exclude quotes globally or for every paper, but rather when you open up the paper in Feedback Studio, if you notice that the score is really high, then go through and exclude the quotes then and see how much of a drop you get. And in that way you can say, oh, with the quotes my student scored 30%, but once I took out the quotes my student scored 12%. That means that 18% of that material was quoted. And then that might be a separate discussion that you have with your student, rather than it's plagiarism, is how much quoted material is good to have in a paper. So just something for you to think about. If you exclude quotes completely, then when you go to look at the report, you can't tell whether the student actually quoted correctly. It's harder to see that. Plus, we've known some students to try to trick our system by putting quotation marks into their papers and then whiting them out, where they're still in the formatting, but they're not visible to the instructor. And they're trying to trick Turnitin to lower their score that way. So just be aware of that that is something that we're aware of, and I don't like to exclude quoted materials globally for that reason. Okay, so any questions on these exclusions? Okay. You're going to decide whether or not to allow students to see similarity reports. You're going to decide whether or not to reveal the grades to students only on the post date. So this relates back to this. This date controls the release of feedback to the students. This date controls the release of grades to the students. So you kind of have to look at the grade and the feedback as two separate entities. I am going to reveal my grades to my students on the post date. So I'm going to grade the feedback and the grades on the post date. It all goes together. Then,
can I make a product suggestion?
Yes, go ahead.
Make a fourth date, which is grade reveal date, right? So that grades aren't revealed until after students look at the feedback.
That's a great suggestion. So product suggestions are better coming from you than they are from me, because they listen to our clients more than they listen to me. I hate to admit that. So, and I didn't say that even though we're recording, right? So right. Taylor, here's the best way to do a product suggestion is to email tiisupport@turnitin.com.
Okay.
And in the subject line, just put feedback.
Okay.
And tell them that same comment, and that carries more weight than if I make the comment for you. Does that make sense? Which yes. I don't mind making for you, but hearing from clients is always a very weighty thing.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. By the way, that's for any of y'all. If you have suggestions, email Turnitin and put feedback into the subject line, and that goes into our feedback request. So right here, you're making a decision whether or not to put papers into the paper repository. For most instructors, you do want to put them into the paper repository, because the goal of using Turnitin is, I'm going to use it this semester for maybe my English 101 class. I'm going to put papers into the paper repository, and next semester when I teach English 101 again, the papers from the second time I teach it, students can no longer turn in the same paper that was turned in by previous students if you do that. So most instructors say, yes, I'm going to put them into the paper repository, and I want those matches. After about 2 to 3 years, you will start eliminating the student practice of turning in papers that were turned in by previous students in previous semesters. There are times, however, when you don't want to put the paper in the repository. For me, I'm a trainer. I don't put papers in the repository because I like to keep my papers clean. Also, when you're doing drafts and you put first draft papers into the repository, this is not for revision assignments. If you create 2 separate assignments, occasionally the papers will match back to each other. They're not supposed to do that. That usually happens when the student has changed the file name of the paper. So just be aware that if you ever see a paper that's like at 98, 99%, it might be that the student matched back to a previous draft. And go into Feedback Studio and check that, and I can show you how to exclude that paper so that you can grade it. But it does happen ever so often that happens. So I'm going to put no repository for me. I'm going to ask Turnitin to search the student paper repository, the internet, and all periodicals. If you didn't want Turnitin to search one of these, you could turn it off. I'm not sure why you would. Just don't turn all 3 of them off, because if you do that, you won't get back a similarity report. So I usually leave all 3 of those on. Then you get to this point where you can attach a rubric and form. So in our advanced training that we're going to do later, I'm going to show you how to create forms. That's going to be part of that training. In this training, I'm just going to show you how to use them. So let me tell you that this right here where it says Launch Rubric Form Manager, that is how I put the paper into the repository. That's how I put the rubric into our system. So I've loaded it in here. I can show you. You just create here, and then you copy and paste, and you've got a couple of options down here about how you want it to score. You can do a weighted rubric, you can do a custom rubric, you can do a rubric that doesn't score at all. You can import and export rubrics out of Turnitin, which means that you can share rubrics with another instructor or with a group of instructors. Once you get one in, we can export them out, send the file to other instructors, and they can import them in. So there's a lot in here with Rubric Manager. For our goal today, I really just want to mark up and score papers, but if you join us the next time, I'll go into a little bit more depth about how to manage rubrics within this here. So I'm loading this argument paper. I just picked it from the drop-down, put it in so that you can see it. By the way, there are Turnitin rubrics online. I'll also show you that in our next training. We'll go over that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable ETS E-Rater, and I'm turning it on. If you don't want students to have access to E-Rater, you just turn it off. I'm going to turn it on so you can see it. I select the level of the handbook that the students can view. I'll show you what that means in just a minute. So if I set it at high school, then they would be able to view the handbook for the high school level. By the way, this does not affect the type of comments the students get from ETS. It just controls the handbook that they have access to. You're going to select the dictionary that's used for the spell check, and then you can select the categories that you want to default as on. So there may be certain categories that you really don't like. You can then save your options as defaults for future assignments, and that would just keep you, if you're always setting up the same type of assignment, you don't have to come back in here. You know that those defaults are saved. I usually check my settings before I click yes, so I'm checking everything, make sure it says what I want it to say, and then I'm going to click submit, and that's going to save the assignment. So before I do that, or as I do that, I can always go back. Does anybody have any questions about what I just did or how I did it? It will give you this page that says, hey, it's been successfully added, and you can click OK, which will take you back to your assignment list. And then we can talk about how you go into the assignment. Okay, questions so far?
Just one quick one, or maybe it's not so quick, but what's the difference between a rubric and a grading form?
Okay, so a rubric is going to be the matrix style rubric where people are going to, instructors click on cells to grade the paper.
Okay.
A grading form is going to be where you can actually type in your comments and then assign point values to the grade.
Okay, so it's more free form.
It's more free form. So I have a lot of instructors that love the rubrics. The one that I've put in for you to show you is a custom rubric.
Okay.
But if I have a grading form, I don't think I have a grading form in y'all's system, but by the time we do the next training, I'll put one in and show you how that works.
Thank you.
No worries. This is my assignment. Now I want to show y'all this, and this is something I have to be honest with you. I don't really like the way that this works, but this is how it works. When you click View Complete, the page that it takes you to is submitting on behalf of a student, which I don't really myself think is that logical because most of my instructors don't submit on behalf of students. However, that's the page you go to. When you click on this, let me scroll this up. You can submit multiple files, cut and paste uploads. You can even do a zip file upload into Turnitin and upload multiple files of papers at a time. Or you can do a single file upload for a single student. Now, when I drop this drop down, I'll see my students that are enrolled in the class in the drop down. If you do ever see it where the only person in the class is this non-enrolled student, that's like a Turnitin demo student, then you can sync the rosters between Turnitin and Blackboard, and all of your students will appear in the list. So I'll show you that. Let me show you this. If I go to single file upload here and I change it to multiple file upload, notice what happens. Now I get all these tabs across the top. Well, this is what I really want, is the assignment inbox, because I want to go in and see what the assignment inbox. So that's a way that I can get there. A second way to get there is to go to Course Tools here and go down, and where it says Turnitin Assignments here, you can click on that and that will give you all of your Turnitin assignments. But I want to point out to you that there's this second Turnitin Assignments by groups, and a lot of people misunderstand that particular functionality. Turnitin Assignments by groups is not group assignments. That is, I'm grouping my assignments and allowing a single student to upload one assignment on behalf of an entire group. What it is instead is its ability to group students together for grading purposes, so that I grade these students together, I grade these students together, and I grade these students together. So just pointing out that that is not what a lot of people interpret it to be. But if you click Turnitin Assignments, it will take you to your list of Turnitin assignments, and then this is the one that I just did. I can then click on it and it will take me to the assignment inbox. Okay. My preferred method is to go to the content area, because that's where I'm going to see everything for that content and view the assignment from there. But just remember, first page they're going to show you is uploading on behalf of a student. That's not really what most people want. So I just change it to multiple file upload and it loads the tabs at the top. So questions about that? Okay, now if you needed to go back and edit the assignment, you can click on the edit assignment page and that will take you back to where we just were. If you click on class stats, that's going to download a it's a CSV file that will contain class statistics. If you click on libraries, that's going to, see there's my CSV file, class stats, so you can check that out and see if it gives you anything that you can use. If you go to libraries, this is where you're going to have a quick mark library, a rubric form manager library, and a peer mark library. Our advanced training, that's a lot of what we're going to cover, is going to be these libraries and Turnitin. So I'll show you how to use those. And then you have this preferences tab. I always tell instructors, if I were an instructor, I would come to preferences and I would change items per page here to 50 or to 100, because most instructors have more than 25 students in a class. So if you have more than 25 students in a class, if you change that to 50, that means all of the students are going to load on one page. It's going to make it easier for you to find students, so you're not having to go from page to page. So just letting you know that. This show page info right here, see where it says about this page and it gives you all of this information? If you turn that to a no, then all of those page informations are going to disappear. So I'm going to change that to 50 and hit submit. So questions so far that I'm showing you?
Do those user preferences apply to every course?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, cool.
So you don't have to do it on an assignment by assignment. It should be in your user settings, but don't quote me on that because I haven't tested that.
Okay.
Now, once I've done my preferences, I'm going to go back to assignment inbox. Now, this is my assignment inbox. So the first thing I need to do is submit. I don't have a student really that I'm submitting for. So what I'm going to do is submit on behalf of a student. I don't necessarily recommend that you do it this way. You're going to have your students submitting on their own. So to submit on behalf of a student, I'm going to click submit and I'm going to put a paper in here for them. Takes me back to my submit page. I'm going to select the student from the drop down. That's going to load their names here. If you want to demo to your students this process, you can use the non-enrolled student to do that for demonstration purposes. It's right handy. I'm going to use this one. I'm going to give it a submission title. This is what I was saying earlier. Taylor, you asked about the files, what type of files that they can. So if you click on what can I submit here, it'll give you the submission criteria for the files. Okay, so questions about that? Notice that Apple files are not in there. Then I'm going to choose for this computer. You can also choose from Dropbox or Google Drive. And I'm going to upload the file, load it in, and then once you've put the file in, you can click upload. This is what the students will be doing. After the students upload the file, they'll give a preview window. I always tell my students on the preview window, they can kind of go from page to page here, is to check and make sure that they've got the right file before they hit confirm. Because especially if you're putting files into our repository. So then they'll confirm. And then they can go to the assignment inbox. I also recommend students should receive a digital receipt. I recommend to instructors that you have your students get into the habit of saving digital receipts so that if you ever have a problem with the submission, they come back to you and they say, I submitted it, I know I did, then you can ask them if you can see that digital receipt. So that's very, very helpful. Okay, so right now it should take about a minute for the similarity report to generate. And remember, this is what I'm going to term the Turnitin assignment inbox. So let's see if we get a report score back. Again, whenever I do this, I have to go here, go to multiple file upload and load the assignment inbox. It drives me crazy, but I do it every time. And I just get so used to it, I don't even think about it. Now it's giving me back a report score of 5%. So this is your assignment inbox. A couple of things I want to point out to you. One is that if this is your first Turnitin assignment, you might want to roster sync. If you roster sync, all of the student names that are on the roster will appear in the assignment inbox. And then you'll be able to see who has submitted and who hasn't submitted, because sometimes those two things are equally as important. If you have students who have not submitted, you can email them from this inbox and say, hey, I'm just reminding you the due date's tomorrow, you need to submit. Here you have what's called the online grading report. After you start grading papers, you might want to check out that report, because if you go in, it's a way for you from a data perspective to keep track of E-rater marks, to keep track of your rubric form marks, and to keep track of your quick marks. It's really nice. Once you get some students in here and you start grading papers, check out this data that you're going to be able to get. You can export the report to a CSV file. If you refresh the report, and that means I'm just going to be adding new data to it, just keep in mind that when you hit that button, it only refreshes the specific report that you're on. So if you're on the quick mark tab, refresh report is only going to refresh quick marks. Okay. When we come back, if we have time at the end, I'll come back and show you this to you in our advanced training. I'll put some students in so I can show you what those reports look like. But they're there. The other thing that you've got in here is that if you check a box like this, it gives you some more options. You can delete papers, so you can select the papers that you need to delete, or you can download here all of the student original files, their original files converted to PDFs, or you can download the online grading paper. Now, what I love about this is the ability, let's say that after you have graded all of the papers and everything is done, if you would like to have hard copies of everything for your files, then if you download the original files, Turnitin is going to put all of the files into a zip folder, and you'll have a folder. It's going to contain all your original files, and then you can store that wherever it is appropriate for your university that they let you store those things. And then you have, with the online grading paper, you're not only saving all of your papers for the students, you're also saving all of the comments that you gave the students. So if you are going to use Feedback Studio to grade papers, that's something that you might want to consider, is downloading all of those online grading papers. So just letting you know that that's in there. This is a link to the file, the original file, so you can download the student paper. This is a link to Feedback Studio. This is a link to Feedback Studio, and this also is a link to Feedback Studio. That test student, though, right there is a link to a portfolio for the student. And if you open up that link, it will give you all of that specific student's papers, their similarities, so they're all here in one place. So test that out when you start using the system, that you can do that. I'm going to go back to the assignment inbox. Now, what I'm going to do, oh, by the way, the paper ID right here, if you ever have an issue that a similarity report is not generating for a student, or you're having some other kind of problems, that paper ID is going to be the number that your support team might request from you. So that's pretty important. Taylor, how is it that you like for people to manage their Turnitin support issues? Can you explain that to everybody?
Yeah, generally, they generally come to us. People can email us at fdis@uh.edu. But if it's from a student, in other words, if the student is saying that, there is an issue, I uploaded my paper, my professor is saying it's not there, then in that case, we want the student to go to UIT support and generate a ticket there.
Okay.
And what happens usually is we then reach out to the student and say, can we have your digital confirmation, email? And if they don't have that, then there's not really a whole lot we can do, Which
is probably why I really like to encourage people to keep a copy of that.
Yeah. Well, we first have to get them to check their email, but we're working on it.
Yeah, and I've been a student, so I understand that too. Okay, so thank you, because I always like for people to know how to handle their support issues if something happens. Now, if you click on the similarity score, that's going to open up Feedback Studio. Notice that Feedback Studio opens up in a pop-up window. I say that because a common issue for new users is that they don't realize that, and then if they go back to Turnitin, like if they come back here, Feedback Studio disappears and they don't know how to find it. They can't get to it. What's happening is that in your Chrome windows, Feedback Studio is a window. So most people, I use a Mac, most people use Windows. So for most people, you go down to the bottom and you click on Chrome and you can see the window there. I have to come here to the side, click on Chrome, and I select the window here. So it's a pop-up window. So just keep that in mind when you're using it. Now this is what I showed you at the very beginning of the training. So I want to point out some things that can make your life easier if you're going to be using this. First thing is the student name and the title are at the top of the screen here. If you are the type of person that you're in a hurry and you just need to put grades in, you can do that. Like I can come in and say, oh, read the paper, I'm giving you a 70. If you do it that way though, see the blue box here that's around the grade? Click out of the blue box here, or click out so that that blue box is no longer there before you use this arrow here to advance to the next student. Because if you don't do that, we've had instances where that grade will not go back into Blackboard. Okay, so that's just a helpful hint. These arrows then can be used by you to advance from student to student or among students to go back and forth. You can also click here on the drop-down arrow and you will see a list of all students that have submitted. You can select from the list. So you can test that out when you get into your accounts and start using this. Here you've got a help button. And this can also be very helpful if you want to go in and find some articles on these different topics. So just pointing that out to you. Had a question from Jackie about ETS handbook. So Jackie, we'll start with ETS so we can answer your question. I'm going to load ETS here. I just click on it, load it up. This, by the way, is what the student would see as well. ETS is going to load as purple comments. When the student or you click on that comment, notice that you have a View Handbook link here at the top. Notice as I click this, watch what happens. I'm going to click it. ETS is going to load in a separate window. You might be on this same window or you might not, so you have to kind of learn to navigate this a little bit. This is the ETS handbook. You do have a table of contents over here to the left, but right here at the right, see how it says high school? That is what I defaulted it to be. My students can come in here and change that level. So if you have an English language learner, they can change to the English language learner handbook, which can be very helpful for people that are not quite as skilled with the English language. Jackie, your question is how often do instructors use the handbook? I really don't know. I don't know how often students use the handbook, but I think the handbook is actually, it's probably underused because it's a quick link to these particular problems. So
I will say, Paige, that I have heard some feedback from instructors that the ETS comments can be a little bit overwhelming for students, right? So is there any way to set up the feedback studio so where that, or is that always turned off when students go there, or can the instructor run it but not turn it on when, like have that layer highlighted when students go in there?
If you were to want that to happen, what I would do is just default all categories as off so that they don't load automatically.
Oh, I see.
Because in other words, these are all the 5 categories. If I were to come in, and remember when we set this up, I had the option of which categories to turn on. So if I only turn on one category, now I've got them all 5 turned off. If I have them to where I only turn on the grammar category, then I'm only going to get the grammar comments. And there's only one. It's a proofreading comment. I don't even know where it's at. There it is. So here it is. So that's what I would say to instructors. If they're finding it to be overwhelming, turn some of the categories off.
Okay. That's a good suggestion.
Use the categories that you like versus all of the categories. And if you want it to not show automatically the student, turn all the categories off. And then students can either turn them on or turn them off at will. So does that help? Yeah,
that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. As an instructor, you can add your own comments or you can dismiss them as you go through. So if you find some that don't make sense to you, you can dismiss them. And then remember, this is an automated service, so there will be comments that don't make sense to people. So this is ETS. This red layer right here is your similarity layer. So when you come into this layer, you can click on the 5%, which is the similarity index, and it will show you the main matches that were found. Now, when you click on that, these matches here all have sub-matches. So if I click the arrow, it's going to load all of those in. And notice that, and I'm going to do that again to make sure that you get what I'm doing. So I'm going to cancel that match breakdown. I'm going to load this up again. So if you click on that arrow, it's going to drill down into the matches. And notice that when it drills down into the matches, you get all of these bullet points. If you get the bullets, then down at the bottom, you'll see an exclude sources here. You can hit exclude sources, and that is where you can go to exclude sources. This is handy if you have, let's say that you had a student paper that matched against another source at 98%, and you realize it was the same student paper, it was their draft copy, and you needed to get rid of that match. You can then come in, highlight it, and exclude it and get it out. So, and then now all of these sources come to the top and you can see what's going on with them. So it just is going to change the view and let you see some other things. The other thing I would point out to you is that if you click on any of these, inside of Feedback Studio, Turnitin is going to navigate to, this is source number 1. It's from the Public Administration Times, I believe is where this one is from. And you can click on that source to navigate out to it. Turnitin is going to give you the matching text here. Turnitin also will give you a button here that's called the Full Source View button that you can pop into this window and you can see the full source in the window so that you can do a side-by-side comparison of the matches to get a better viewpoint. So there's a couple of ways that you can get that pop-up. If I'm sitting in a site, and I eliminated that other one, and let's come down here. Hold on. Let me go back off the full source text. Okay, I can click on these numbers to get that pop-up. There's different ways you can kind of navigate the report. So just play around, see how it works. The other thing I want to point out to you is that that 5, when I clicked on it, that gave me the match overview. If I click on the second button, that gives me every source match in the paper. And then I can click on any one of these to navigate to that source match, and I can start navigating. And again, whenever you see bullets, that means that you can exclude sources. So I can come down, click, click the wrong button. Oh, and now watch. See, now I'm on those tabs. I've got to find Turnitin again. So I'm going to go back to Chrome. Here's Feedback Studio. So if I click the button Exclude Sources, and then I check another source off, see, I can exclude them there too. You can also mark exclusions here under the filters. I can exclude quotes on a paper basis. Notice for this one, I had excluded the bibliography. Remember, I did that in the settings. So right now, the bibliography is not included. I could turn that off, apply that change. Now it's included. I'm up to 7% match on the paper. So you can mess with the paper. I hate to say mess. That's probably not the best word. You can analyze the paper using these tools. If I go to this 4th button here, these are the sources that I've excluded. If I want to restore them, I can restore them one by one, or I can hit Restore All, and I can put those back into the report. In this case, it didn't change the percentage score, but now all the sources are back into the report. So questions about your introduction here to similarity reports. In our advanced training, we'll delve a little bit more deeply into using those tools. And I also want to introduce you, though, to the feedback tools. I'm going to introduce you to the rubric first. Notice that this is the rubric I loaded into this paper. My rubric had 165 points total on it. I'll show you where those come from. This right here, by the way, is a slider system you can use to grade papers. If you don't like that, you can always expand the rubric using this expander button. That will expand the rubric into a full-size window. And so now I can see it. But see all these points that are in here? The Turnitin arrived at 165 points by adding up all of the top-level points in each row. So that adds to 165. And now as I select, it's just totaling up the points. This is called a custom rubric. You can put in custom rubrics, you can put in a weighted rubric, or you can do a grading form. So we'll explore those in our next training. Now, look at the criteria. See how it says introduction, thesis, and support right there? Keep that in mind. Now I'm going to show you quick marks. I'm going to go up here. Quick marks are comments that you can save in our system so that you can reuse them. So these are the ones that I've got in the system right now. Notice that they're associated to a set called the commonly used set. I've got all these sets in my system I can use. I can go to composition marks and change sets. But when I have a set that I'm using, I'll drag and drop the comment here onto the paper, and then students can read that comment. I can also add my thoughts to the comment. So quick marks are a quick way for you to add your comments to the paper. You can also add in here like a Google link, or add a web link, I'm sorry. So I'm going to put Google in here. I have some instructors that they add links to videos and resources to their marks.
That's a pretty snarky link.
What, by Google Link?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just use it. But what I love about this system, honestly, is that this assign criteria button. If I click that, these are the criteria on my rubric. So if you're intending to count off on the rubric, you can then tell the students, you know what, I'm going to count off because of your introduction. You can tell them that by associating this mark. And then when you come back to the rubric here, notice that the mark is associated. Students see the association, you see the association, and then you can use that to drive your scores on your rubrics. So it creates this link between how you're scoring the paper and how you're marking the paper. So most people, when they see this, they go, well, how do I do this for myself? So again, in advanced training, that's what we're going to cover, is how do you set this up and what are some best practices. But just to kind of introduce you to the idea, that if you go back to the quick marks here, there is a settings cogwheel here. If I click on that, then here I can go and start creating my sets, and I can start working with quick marks. So I'm going to teach you that in our next training, is how to do this. Now, just to let you know, with the markups, you can click on the paper itself. You can add a free-form comment. I could put a comment in about my office hours. And if I knew that I was going to count off on the rubric because of that, I could associate it. If I knew that I was going to reuse it on multiple papers, I could just convert it to a quick mark, associate it to a set, and now I'm creating my own marks. And I will teach you next time how you can organize and save your marks to make your grading life a lot easier. And then after you've marked up the paper, you can add text comments, like you can type on the paper. You can highlight the paper here. You can add a quick mark here. Tell them to delete something. There's all kinds of ways that you can highlight papers. After you've done that, you can then come to this tab and you can add voice comments and you can have text comments. And the best thing about this is there's a download button with a current view report. You can download all of your comments and everything that you've done into a report. Okay, so questions about this? It's 2 o'clock, so my time is up. So this was your introduction, kind of a getting started with Turnitin. Hopefully I've given you enough information to get you started. So do y'all have any questions for me though?
I have one comment just about the highlighting and the freeform comments.
Yes.
Paige, if you can highlight a bit of text really quickly.
Okay.
And then click the comment button.
Okay.
See in the top right-hand corner, there's if you click that, there's these different colors. And so what I like to do is color code my comments.
Yeah.
So that students know, okay, I'm talking about argumentative structure here, and then I'm talking about something else with a different color. So I find that to be really helpful. Yeah.
I have some professors, they use green as their go color, anything that they like in the paper.
Exactly, yeah.
And then they use other colors to represent other things. So when we have our second level training, we can go in more into some best practices and how to do some of the more intricate things, if that's the better word, I don't know. Go into more details though, I hope. So when is that scheduled currently? Taylor, do you know when our next one is?
Yes, 1 second, let me pull that up real quick. It is July 23rd at 2 p.m.
Okay, And the other thing I'll mention to you is if y'all ever want to do like a best practices session, we can also get one of those for you. I've done several different types of sessions for people. So let's chat sometime.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Paige. If anybody has any follow-up questions, please send them to me, and then I can forward them over to Paige, and we can get them back to you. But yeah, thank you again so much, and this is great. I guess you'll send the link to the video?
I will. I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Okay, perfect.
After I convert it. So thank you very much. Y'all have a great day.
All right, you too. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.